So welcome back to a grotty version of the vlog. I mean, it is chucking it down with rain this morning. Oh, check this out. Fortunately, though, today I get to spend most of it inside at Sigma Sport, getting a bike fit done and getting all of your hot bike fit questions answered for you all. So I've got an hour's ride there, so hopefully I can get this over and done with pretty quick so I can get back inside in the warm. Yeah, so I'll check back in with you when I get to the shop. See you in a bit. So we're now in the studio. We're kind of having a pre-bike fit interview to kind of get an understanding of my riding history. What is the importance of this, Jimmy?
Well, to get to know the rider primarily, and also to discuss any consistent issues, pain or discomfort on the bike, and to work out areas that we perhaps need to focus on during the session to make the rider more comfortable, more efficient, and enjoy the riding more.
Okay. So we're just going through at the moment, taking measurements of my current setup, so it gives us a baseline as to where we're going to start changing the measurements to help improve my position. Now that's anything from the saddle height to the setback, the bar width, the reach, crank length, you name it, it's going to be measured, and yeah, like I said, that's where we're going to base our measurements from.
And then just use a pen to draw a line where the ball of the foot sits inside the shoe. Have you always used red cleats?
I haven't. I've just been. I've always preferred slightly more fixed than loose, but yeah. I used to use the blue ones.
Right. Okay.
How do you know which cleats to choose?
Generally, we would opt for something that has float, and with Shimano, the yellow cleats give the most float, so we would normally opt for those as a starting point.
Yeah.
Less float is more a personal preference thing than a
right.
bike fit thing. Very rarely do we recommend zero float.
Right, okay, and these red ones are zero float, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
The foot needs to move rotationally through the pedal stroke in order to allow the knee to do what
right,
it needs to do.
Okay.
So it's not impossible to produce a comfortable position for your knees with a fixed cleat, but it's much more difficult. After this initial look at you on your bike to assess the position, take some video and some pressure mapping, we'll switch to the jig, which enables us to change pretty much everything, and at that point we'll start to try different components,
okay.
Saddle, cleats, as you said before, crank length, bar width, all that stuff we can change once we get on the jig.
Awesome.
Resistance, which is just here.
So this is exercise 1 then, is it?
Yeah, this is leg, an indication of general leg flexibility, so it takes into account the hamstring, the calf and the lower back to a certain degree, so we're just getting an idea of how flexible you are in that area. And then the second one is hip flexion, so this is the important one when we're thinking about front end height and crank length. And I'm just going to push your knee up towards your chest to the point where we feel some resistance, which is just about there. So at this point, what I'm doing with your right leg is having an effect on your left leg. It's just lifting your left leg off the bench slightly. And then I'm just going to hold you in that position and take an angle measurement there.
Right, so I'm going to get some examples now of who's got good posture. I mean, for me, it's not particularly great news, unfortunately, but on the plus side, it means I've got a lot to improve on.
So it takes a lot of effort for you to hold your head in that position. Also, you have to flex low down because you sit with your lower back, your sacrum is actually quite upright, and it means that you have to flex low down again in order to reach the front of the bike. If you were able to sit with a more neutral spinal posture, you would be more comfortable in your lower back, which is an area where we know you've got some issues at the moment.
Yeah.
Also, your neck would be more comfortable as well, which again is an area that you've mentioned you've got some problems with.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a bit of neck pain and shoulder pain, so it's all starting to add up now. So yeah, my questions are answered. Right, so we've just done some single leg squatting exercise to see how my knee's tracking. And this has ultimately explained what Jimmy had predicted of having my ankle roll inwards. Is that right?
Yeah, both ankles roll in, and the knee generally follows the ankle. And on your
Left, you control that by loading laterally on your foot, so you put a lot of pressure on the outside of your foot in order to get stability. And on the right side, you do something slightly different. The upshot on both sides is that you're using a lot of energy to try and control knee tracking, which you could save by having something inert in the shoe, i.e. a footbed with some arch support to control the foot and allow your knees to track better without you having to expend energy to do that.
Arch support this. So I've got two different sized arches, one at 32, one at 34 seated. Right, so we're down in the footbed factory right now. So Sigma have got this really cool machine from Sidas, inner soles. So this is what we're setting up here. So you're creating a neutral footbed at the moment, are you?
Yeah, just flattening out the mould so that we can take a mould of your feet in a few minutes, just making sure it's clean.
So interestingly, I had a question, which funnily enough is from my brother, Ben. He's just started cycling and got his first pair of road shoes, but it comes with obviously a standard inner sole.
Yeah.
How important is it, or how necessary is it to get a custom footbed?
I think it's very important to get the feet as stable as possible, and a custom footbed is a good way of achieving that. And a generic footbed can do a quite good job as well, but obviously the custom one is going to match the exact shape of your foot in its strongest position. So if you want the ultimate in terms of foot stability and support, then custom footbeds are definitely the way to go.
Okay, so good value for money then.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. The stable foot is really the foundation of the whole fit. So you can't really expect your pelvis or your upper body to be as stable as it could be if your feet aren't stable.
Cool. And like with a lot of things, I mean, it's obviously really cool to have a new set of wheels, which might put you back a couple of grand. But I mean, to have a set of custom inner soles, and what does this cost? To get a set of
£100 for custom foot.
So £100 for a set of inner soles, which is not bad money spent really. Same with the bike fit. And that, funny enough, was another question by one of our viewers. How much does it cost to have a bike fit with you guys?
So it's £300 for our full fitting, including the saddle pressure mapping analysis, and we use the Dartfish motion capture as part of that service as well, and that normally takes 3 hours. 3 hours, and by the end of the session you'll have, if you bring a bike with you, you'll have your bike set up in the optimal position as well.
Got the old footbeds in the oven. Love it. Cook a roast in that.
So if you could just put both feet on the pads for me, James. Not yet, just the weight of your feet, and then I'm gonna just move your feet around to get your ankle in that neutral position, and then we'll let the air back into the bags, and you'll sink down into the pads, and that will give us a foot roll. And then if you just move this heel out very slightly. Yeah, good. And then that one's okay. So what we want to do ideally is maintain this ankle posture that you have here when you stand up. So if you stand up now, and try and keep your ankle in that posture, slight bend in the knees, and then you're going to bias the weight slightly towards your forefoot, slightly, yeah, keep the ankle neutral. So on this side, I'd like you to try and roll the ankle out that way slightly. So it's almost like you're kind of on this side, it's almost like, so keep the heel where it is, don't lift the heel. It's almost as if you're trying to shorten the foot and make an arch. Does that make sense? That's it. Yeah, let's keep it bending your knee. And then,
So I'm rolling my foot out to the side here.
and then just hold that position. I'd like to hold that position as I let the air back in, and you'll sink down into the mould.
Okay, so my weight is slightly on the balls of my feet.
Slightly biased towards your forefoot, yeah. And then I'll let you down into the mould, and then I'm going to just help you into the mould. So I'm going to push you down on this right side first.
So my feet are now sinking.
And then I'm just going to push you into the mould on this side as well. And then can you just do what we did before, roll that ankle out slightly, that's it. As you can see, they're quite soft now, and all the layers have melted together.
Yeah.
And then we put the heel in first. Position that at the back of the mould. And then lay the rest of the footbed into the mould, and then I'm going to ask you just to put your foot back on top. Don't stand up, just put your foot back on top, and then just come back a little bit on this side. Move the foot back a little bit further, a bit more. Yeah, cool. Okay, hold it there.
So am I not pushing down then?
No, just the weight of your foot is enough just to hold its shape.
Awesome. But around sort of 2 to 3 weeks turnaround, right? Alright, cool.
Yeah, and same on this side again, just
Yeah, I might back on top.
Right, so we've got the rest of our questions here. Got them. The first one from Tommy McCall, who's asked, if you drop your saddle slightly, should you also move it further forward or backwards to a similar amount?
You would move it if you want to get it to the same position it was in terms of the fore and aft, then you would need to move it back slightly. So as you move it down, obviously because of the angle of the seat tube, it will move the saddle forward slightly. So you need to adjust the saddle by moving it back, but it wouldn't be if you move, for example, if you move the saddle down by 10 millimeters, you wouldn't move it back by 10 millimeters. It'd probably be more like 2 or 3 millimeters. So you make a smaller adjustment for the fore and aft than you had done for the saddle height.
So it's like a 20-30% like amount of the saddle height.
But remember, your body's going to do a slightly different thing with the lower saddle height. So you just need to, I mean, ideally you'd get a bike fitter to look at it for you rather than use a formula to do it. But your body will behave in a slightly different way. So it's not an exact science in that respect. You need to probably get someone to look at you pedaling as you do that.
Okay, cool. Right, number 2, it's from another Tommy. This is Tommy Clayton this time, who's asked us, when being on the cusp of a frame size, should you either go up or down a size?
So it depends on what you're going to use the bike for. So if you are using the bike for racing, for example, or if you want an aggressive position, you like to ride fast and you like a low front end position, then probably the smaller frame would be better. So that would mean you'd need a longer stem to get the same position, which would probably work better if you're riding the bike quickly. A longer stem tends to make the bike more stable at higher speed. And then if you wanted to use the bike for more kind of endurance-based riding, then the bigger frame might be better, just in terms of front end height, because it would allow you to get the front end higher without using as many spacers, which may be better for endurance riding than the smaller frame. So very much depends on what you use the bike for.
That was a very thorough answer. That's a good one. Nice one. Right, so next one, Julie Parker has asked us, she'd like to know the advantage of going to shorter cranks. So currently she's 5 foot.
Yep.
She uses 172.5 at the moment.
Yep.
Is it worth her going shorter?
It could well be. It depends on what you use the bike for, and it depends on your position. So if you are riding a low front end position, then the shorter crank is going to allow you to get over the top of the pedal stroke more easily with your hip more open, which will mean that you can push earlier and harder with your glutes. So that hip extension will be more effective with the shorter crank. And the lower the front end position with a given hip flexibility, the easier it is going to be to pedal with a shorter crank. But it is massively dependent on hip flexibility. So again, you need to get someone to assess your hip flexibility.
Cool, hope that helps, Julie. Next one is an interesting one from Adam Thomas, who's come to us saying that he's got numb hands and fingers. Is this to do with saddle height and position?
It could be that the saddle's too high and it's tipping you forward onto the bars, which means that you're having to use your hands in order to prop your upper body up, so you're tipped forward too much onto the front of the bike. So it could be something to do with saddle height. It could be something to do with front end height. So it's the relative position between the saddle and the bars, which could be the issue. It could easily be to do with the way that you interact with the saddle as well. So if the saddle isn't supporting your pelvis properly, then you have to prop yourself up with your hands and stabilize your body using your hands rather than allowing the saddle to do it. So it could be it could be the saddle height, it could be where you're sitting on the saddle, and it could be the front end height as well.
Cool, there's a lot of things to think about there. I think moral of the story here is get yourself in for a bike.
So this is a live view of the way that James is interacting with the saddle, and the pressure mapping technology allows us to record and then analyse the way that James's pelvis moves on the saddle. We can use that data to work out how the pelvis is moving and how to improve the quality of that movement, and also how to allow the rider to interact with the saddle in a more functional way to improve efficiency and comfort. And it shows quite clearly that there's more pressure on the left side of the saddle than on the right side of the saddle, and also the pressure is biased significantly towards the front of the saddle.
So that's not going to be any good, is it?
No, that's not good. It's definitely not good.
No, really not good.
This area of the pelvis is where there is a lot of nerves and a lot of soft tissue, which is obviously not there to support weight. The weight ideally would go through the skeleton and not through soft tissue. So you must get saddle sores on this side, or you must have had saddle sores on this side.
Definitely always biased to the left.
Yeah. And there must be some numbness on long rides as well. That must be, or maybe you fidget on the saddle, so you relieve that pressure periodically by getting off the saddle.
Yeah, I mean, I am a bit of a fidgeter on the bike, but I think by looking at this map here, if you value having children, you should probably move this pressure slightly further back on the saddle.
Yeah. We want the sit bones really to be the point where most of the pressure starts, and then we want to locate the pelvis so that the pressure is distributed over the longest area possible, and definitely not any pressure in the middle where the soft tissue is.
So could this be down to the saddle angle, maybe?
Saddle angle, saddle shape, saddle position, everything really contributes to that pressure line.
Okay, cool.
And the situation, I'm afraid, gets even worse when you're on the drops. So this is you on the drops. So in this position,
that is awful.
Yeah, there's higher pressure, and it's even further forward on the saddle, and you can see that the pressure areas meet in the middle, so there's virtually no skeletal contact where we want it, and there's a lot of soft tissue contact where we don't want it. So prolonged periods of riding on the drops will produce some soft tissue damage at some point.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like coming in for a bike fit was just in the nick of time. Yeah, I mean, I'm only 28. I value having children yet, so I mean, that pressure map really don't look very good at the moment, so hopefully I can come away from here and be slightly healthier for the better, hopefully.
Let's hope so.
We'll see. So we've been talking a lot about angles. The last question is from Badger Phillips, who's asked, what is the optimal angle of shoulders and back in relation to the bar and stem setup?
Again, I sound a bit like a parrot, but it depends massively on what you're using the bike for, and also factors such as core strength come into that as well. So if you had, say, 90 degrees between your back and your upper arm, that would probably be a good starting point for a kind of an endurance riding position. You might find that a more aggressive position would have a more obtuse angle, so you'd have a bigger angle between those two points. So again, I mean, it depends massively on what you're using the bike for, and also the physical condition of the rider. You'll see a lot of people who ride bikes for a living will have quite an obtuse, a big angle between their upper body and their upper arm, but that's because they have spent many hours sitting in that position, so they can do it. Less experienced riders or people who have less time to train probably need the bars a bit closer and a bit higher to make that angle smaller.
This is the position that we'd like your pelvis to be in on the saddle. So we've got good skeletal contact with the wider, flatter part of the saddle towards the back. And as you go into a more aggressive position, you simply rotate the pelvis forward so that you bring these rails of bone into play. And a saddle that has a cutout in the middle will allow you to sit in this position without putting pressure on soft tissue at the front.
So the first thing we're going to do is try and introduce you to this saddle and get you to sit in the saddle in a slightly different way to the way that you're sitting on your existing saddle. So if you could stop with the cranks horizontal, so one foot in front of the other, and then you can see quite clearly on the screen at the moment the contact, the bony contact, is quite far forward on the saddle. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to actually move your pelvis back on the saddle and get those areas of contact a little bit further back, maybe a tiny bit more.
Okay, that's good. Maybe a little bit further forward actually. Good, perfect. And there we can see that your ischial tuberosities are actually, so that's the kind of the most pointy bit of your pelvis is pushing into the saddle on each side. What we'd like you to do from that position is to rotate your pelvis forward, and now we can see we've got nice elongated areas of contact left and right, but crucially in your case, and in everyone's case really, is we don't have any contact in the middle. You can see that we've got a completely relieved channel through the middle of the saddle, which is because the saddle has a cutout. So we're not going to get that pressure on soft tissue that we got earlier on. And
So how do you choose like the right width saddle? Because like some saddles come in different sizes.
yeah, that's right. So there are a few ways to go about it. One is we can actually take a sit bone width measurement prior to selecting the saddle, and we can predict what saddle is going to be best for you in terms of the distance between your sit bones. The best way I've found to do it is actually to take a pressure map like we're doing here. This particular saddle is 128 millimeters wide, so it's actually quite narrow.
Yeah.
But it works really well for your pelvic width and for your sit bone width. But more importantly, in your case, it works really well as we rotate your pelvis forward, because as you rotate your pelvis forward, the area that's in contact with the saddle actually gets narrower because of the shape of your pelvis.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, you can see that we've got a really nice contact between you and the saddle, and we've got the highest pressure area well in from the side of the saddle. It's not like it's sitting on the edge or hanging off the edge of the saddle at all. So that's a really nice looking pressure map.
So naturally then, like the bigger the rider, would you have a wider saddle?
Not necessarily. Really big riders can have narrowly spaced sit bones and vice versa. You can get some really skinny guys with really wide sit bones. So it doesn't really come down to the proportions of the rider. It's to do with the skeletal proportions of the pelvis specifically. But also, for a more aggressive position, sometimes a narrower saddle can be better because as you rotate forward, the areas of contact between the pelvis and the saddle get closer together.
Right, so here we've got a before and after of my saddle position. So this is before, isn't it? And
That's
we're
right,
trying to alleviate this section.
Get rid of the pressure on soft tissue and also equalise the pressure left and right. So you can see previously we had a lot more pressure on the left than on the right, and we had pressure very far forward and pressure in the middle, which would be on soft tissue. And then by changing the saddle and moving the saddle forward, we've moved the centre of pressure back on the saddle, and we've got more equal contacts left and right. So we're distributing the load over both sides of the pelvis more evenly, and most importantly, we have no pressure in the middle, so soft tissue is completely unmolested in this scenario, which is good news.
Yeah, so it's also important to note that this saddle here was a Selle Italia SLR with no cutout,
Yeah.
and this saddle was...
These are Bontrager Montrose in the narrowest 128 millimeter width, with a cutout, which gives us the opportunity to unload soft tissue and exaggerate or accentuate the load through the skeleton, because that's what the skeleton's for, really, is to bear weight. So.
Now, thanks very much. I think you've answered all of our questions as thoroughly as is physically possible. Those were our top 7. Some people did repeat asking the same question, so I'm sorry if we didn't feature your name. Nevertheless, though, I hope it answered everything that you wanted to know, and it helps you get a better fit on your bike in the long run. Right, so home. 8 hours out the house. That's one long ass day, 6 of which were in the Bike Fit with Sigma. Now, I hope we got all of your questions answered for you. Jimmy gave us a really in-depth insight into Bike Fit, the things to do, the things not to do, and some really, really great advice had. On the Bike Fit front, I mean, I went in having not actually had that many Bike Fits in my time. I had one about 8 years ago, and I haven't had one since. So it's amazing to see how the technology has changed. And right now, I mean, I feel way more glued to the bike. And I think with the custom innersoles being my number one thing that I've taken out of it. I mean, I had a flaring knee before, and it has completely corrected that instantaneously. And what was really nice was I had a before and an after to see the effects of this Bike Fit with my hour commute there and hour commute back. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll look forward to seeing you all guys soon.